Okay, so good evening. Yeah, so welcome to, I think this should be our 16th lecture. Yeah, KodeCamp 2.0, Android beginner level track. So today we're actually going to be talking about activities and intents. Okay, we'll be looking into that today. And then yeah, so with that, we're going to be building an application. It's going to be more like a dictionary application. Okay, it's going to be like a dictionary. It's actually going to be a dictionary application, but just with some few less functionality, not going to be much. Okay, but at least use that to explain what activities are, what intents are also. Okay, so that's that. So let's just get straight into it. So first of all, let me just give you a rundown of what I've actually done. Okay, so I've actually set up this project already. I'll be showing you how to clone a project on GitHub so you can actually get this. Okay. So what do we have here? Okay, so this is a dictionary app demo. So this is what we're going to actually use. So I've already set up a few things, which just a recycler view and stuff that you have actually done before. Okay, you've actually done that. So you're already familiar with activities, recycler view, adapter. Okay, so but basically what you're going to be learning today is how to use, like I said, activities and intents, and then how to use what we call an explicit intent to navigate to a specific activity, how to use an implicit intent to navigate to a content in another application, and then of course how to add menu options. Okay, how to add menu options to your add buttons on your app bar, the three dots, you have on your applications. Yeah, so how do we add that into an application? Okay, so we'll use that to build the dictionary application. Okay, so yeah, so let's move on. So these are the files that we have here. So I have an activity and I have an activity package, and then I have an adapter package. So the let me just open the adapter one first. So we have two adapters here, the letter adapter and the word adapter. Okay, so of course it's a dictionary application. So what we have here, so let me just show you what we have here now. We just have this. Okay, just open this up. So this is just what we have. Okay, so this is just a recycler view. So these are letters. So the idea is, of course, when you click on A, you get to see words that starts with A. When you click on B, you get to see words that start with B and the like. So this is just a recycler view, okay, of letters. So that's why we have the adapter for the letters, okay, and then we have the words. So we have an adapter for the words. So the letter adapter. Now I've done some setup here. Okay, so there are some comments that will actually help you to know what some other things are. So but don't bother a lot about this part of the code. I'll get to a point where I'll talk about it. Okay, so don't bother much about it. Okay, so we have our adapter, of course, just like you've actually done. So just a few things I'm doing here. I'm generating a range, okay, from A to Z, and then I'm converting it to a list. Okay, so these are lists. It's going to be letters from A down towards Z, and then I'm converting it to a list, and then excuse me. Of course, I have the view holder, which actually holds the button, the get item count. You can actually go through this. We have actually made use of adapters before, and then of course the unbind view holder. So I left this at get. So before we just did list and then position in a square bracket, but I'm just also showing you this so you can actually know that there are two ways to doing it. But of course, the best is to actually use the indexing operator, which is actually this. Okay, this is actually what's the best way to actually do that. Okay, so that's for the letter adapter. So the letter adapter is used by the recycler view in our main activity. Okay, so in our main activity, yeah, that's where we're using this letter adapter. So when each letter, okay, just like I showed you here, is a button. Each letter is a word button with, and it has an on-click listener, but of course it doesn't do anything now. We'll actually implement that. Okay, so in the on-click listener, that's where we're going to handle button presses to actually navigate. So when I click on S, I want to go to another screen, another activity that has the words that begin with S. Okay, then of course we have the word adapter also. Okay, so this already, so we just have for our list here, we just have an empty string for this for filtered words. Don't worry, I just set some of these things up, like I said. So, but basically what I'm actually doing here. Now, when you look at this, I'm getting a words now. I have a list of words in a string that I have, and then I created an array. Remember, I told you some of the things we're learning, we're going to implement them. So remember when you had to have a string, an array of strings in one of the tasks that was given. So these are the words. So you can see A, B, C, and the likes. So yes, so you can actually just, so that's where that came from. And then to converted it to a what list. So we're going to retrieve the list of words. And so we're storing it in this variable called words. And then I created a variable, an empty list actually called filtered words, because remember we looked into we used filters, in the last class what we talked about collections. Okay, so remember filter was it creates a new list. When you want to filter a word, it gives you back a new list with the corresponding operations, filter operations that you actually with. So for our filtered words, so first of all, we passed in our array. Okay, those words, we passed it into, because we have converted it to a list now. So we passed it into, we're updating this particular filtered word variable, and then we're filtering it. So what are we filtering it with? We are filtering it with, remember our 8 dots. So we're using this starts with. That means we want to filter each word that starts with a particular letter. So this letter now, we are just passing it in our word adapter. It's just going to be a string. Okay, it could be A, B, or C. And then, of course, we want to ignore the case. We don't want it to be case sensitive. Okay, and then we want to shuffle it. And then, of course, we want to return just 5, the first 5. That's why you see take. So return the first 5. And then we want to also sort it for it to come in alphabetical order. We looked at these things, in the last class. And then, of course, view holder, get item count, unbind view holder. That's basically what we actually want to do. So we'll get to now use this, but this is just an overview. So once we now want to implement certain things, then I'll dive more into that. Okay, but that's just to let you know what we want, what we have. So basically, the word adapter. So this word adapter is going to be used in the detail activity, okay, to display a list of words. So if you notice, I didn't actually do anything here, so we'll do it together. So we use it to display a list of words. Now, we can't actually go to that screen yet, okay? We can't actually navigate to that screen, because notice when I click on, there's nothing happens. So we can't actually go to that activity yet, or that screen yet, okay? But for now, just know that each word has a button with an on-click listener, each of this, okay? Each of these has a button with an on-click listener, okay? So we'll actually do all that. We'll do all that, okay? So let's move on. And then what else do I need to show as well? This is just that activity. Everything here shouldn't look strange to you. So we're going to do some changes. Okay, for now we're going to do some changes. We're going to add an option menu. Okay, we're going to add an option menu. Okay, and then I'm going to convert this. I'm going to add an option menu here. Okay, at this point, and then I'm going to convert this to, it's too long, A to Z, it's kind of too long. So I'll convert it to a grid. Okay, to use grid layouts. Okay, so we can actually have it looking much more I think readable. Okay, so let's just talk about intents first. Okay, let's talk about intents. So now an intent is basically it's an object representing an action to be performed. Okay, an intent is an object representing some action or an action to be performed. Okay, now the most common use of intent actually is to launch an activity. Okay, the most common use of intent is actually to launch an activity, but it's not the only thing. You can see this, if you go to your Android manifest, you can see intent filter. So of course, when you're running your application, wherever this intent filter is, that's the screen that gets launched first. Okay, that's why main activity is the first activity, just like your main function. Okay, because it has this intent, which is your launcher. Okay. Now, So it's just an object that represents some action that will be what performed. Okay, so this is the most common, launching an activity is the most common use of an intent. But of course, there are other uses of an intent. So there are two types of intent. Okay, the first, we have the implicit intent, and then we have the second type is the what explicit intent. Okay, now in an explicit intent is highly specific. Okay, it is highly what specific in the sense that it knows exactly, where you want to go. You know the exact action to be performed and where you want it to be performed. Okay, you know the exact activity you want to launch. Okay, and of course, often is a screen in your own application. Probably you want to go to the contact us screen. You want to go to the about us. You want to go to let's say profile. Okay, so any screen in your application, you actually use what an explicit intent, because it is specific. You know exactly, the exact screen, the exact activity, you want to actually launch. So use an explicit intent. That's why the word explicit there, you have to make it clear, you have to make it known. It has to be specific. But an implicit intent is a bit more abstract. Basically, you tell the system the type of action. Okay, you tell it the type of action, and the system is responsible for figuring out how to fulfill that request. All you do is just tell it, okay, this Android, this is what I want you to do. This is the action I want you to take when I do this. When I press this button, this is the action I want. So the Android system now figures out, how to actually fulfill that your request. Okay, so actions could be probably opening a link. When you click on a link, you see some pop-up of what applications on your phone, not on that application you're using. So a typical example is probably share functionality. When you're on WhatsApp and then you want to share something, maybe you want to share a link or because now there are options to share it outside your application. Okay, that's an implicit intent. You're on WhatsApp, but you can share something on Facebook. You can share something as a text message. You can share something. You see several applications pop up. You understand? So composing an email, making a phone call. So these things are implicit intents, where you tell the system the type of action and it figures out how to take that action. You have actually used all these things without just knowing that it is it, but now you can actually place a name to it. But these are stuff you have actually made use of. Okay, so generally, whenever you want to show an activity in your own application, you use an explicit intent. Okay, you use an explicit intent. But for actions that don't necessarily involve your the current application, okay, you use an implicit intent. You use an implicit intent. Okay, so that's actually that. Okay, if you have questions, of course, just drop it on the chat, or you can just raise your hand. Okay, and then I'll just answer that. But if there is none, I'm just going to move on. So let's set up an explicit intent now. So when we talk about explicit, we're basically saying we know where we want to go in the application. Okay, we know where we want to go. So for that, I'm going to go to my letter adapter, and in my unbind view holder, that's where I'm going to. I want to set up an explicit intent here. Okay, so let's do this. First of all, I'm going to say holder. Now, holder dot button. Okay, so our button here. Okay, let's do. Okay, so let me just show you. This is where we have the button, that the item view for that recycler view. Okay, yeah, so this is just the button. Now let's come back. So button dot, so let's just set on click listener here. Okay. So then let's get a reference to the word context. I'm going to our context. So we'll talk about context. Probably maybe before round up on the next class. So it really gets folder.view.context. I think I'll take a time out to really talk about context. And then let's now create an intent. So I'm going to first of all, of course, remember we said it's an object. So it means that there's a class. So we have the intent class. So how do we do that? Then it's not, so this intent class takes in parameters, okay? It takes in a context, and then of course where you're actually going to. So I'm going to pass in context because we have gotten a context. And then where do we want to go to? So we want to go to the details activity. So we'll do the detail activity, put this colon, and then you have the class.java. So that represents a particular activity. Okay. So this is the name of the activity you want to show. Okay. It's the name of the activity you want to show. And so another thing about intent, you can pass in extra information. Okay. You can pass in some extra information like, okay, I want to go to this activity, but there's this information I want to take across that this other activity will actually need. A typical example is, on your, let's say you're using your phone on your contacts. Okay. When you click on a particular name, it takes you to another screen with much more details about that particular contact. Okay. So that's possible. That's actually an intent. But there are more details that are being passed. There's an information that's being passed. Okay, that's why when you click on the next, if you click on the next, let's say you go back, click on another contact, maybe the first one you clicked on, what word will I use? What name? Okay, Afolabi. And then the detail of Afolabi in the next screen shows his name, shows an image, the view, of course, the design is the same. Okay, so when you click on another person, let's say Omar, the only thing that changes, the information changes, but the design is still the same. So there's information that is being passed to the next activity. Okay, so that's actually what we're actually going to do. We want to pass in an information to the next activity. So how do we do that? I'm just going to say intent dot, I'll use the put extra method. Okay, put extra. And what extra do I want to put? I'm going to now say letter. I'm going to explain this. And then a value. So I'm going to say holder dot button dot text. I'm going to explain this dot to string. Okay, so first of all, what is an extra? Okay, let me just go at this. Now, remember I said that basically an intent is just a set of instructions. Okay, it's just a set of instructions. There's no instance of the destination yet in an intent. There's no, it's just a set of instructions. There's no destination yet. But so instead, an extra here is a piece of data. It could be a number, it could be a string that is given a name to be retrieved later. So you see the name here, we are just passing it a name. It could be anything, because this name is what we're going to use to retrieve it when we get to the other activity. Okay, so it's just like when you want to send a letter to someone, or you want to send something to someone, you name it. So the person can actually receive it with that name. You can think of it as an ID also, but it's called a name here. And this is the name, and then the value is the text that is on this button. That is the value. So when you say holder.button.text, we're getting the text on that button. And what is the text? It's either A or B or C or D or E, dependent on where the particular button we click. So what we are now doing is that we are passing the letter. So when you click on B, we want to pass B to the next screen. And the reason we're doing that, so that the next screen will receive that B and then use that to now display only the words that starts with B. Okay, so that's what an extra is. It's a piece of data. It could be a string, it could be a number, and that's giving a name to be retrieved later. So it's just similar to you passing an argument when you want to call a function. Okay. Now because our detailed activity, okay, it can be shown for any letter. Okay, we need to tell it which letter to present. Okay. Now I want to ask a question. I don't know if why do we have to call this to string here? Because of course holder.button.text, okay, is still a string. Okay. Do you think it's necessary? Like, could I just take this out and it works? Does anybody want to try? Maybe you can drop on the chat or something. Anybody? Now, the holder.button.text, excuse me, it's a character sequence. Now, if you look at this, if I hover around here, you see the type char sequence, character what sequence, that is a sequence of characters. Okay, and it's actually something called an interface. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about interfaces later. Okay, we'll talk about it later. But basically, the only thing is just know that it's just a way to, how will I put this, to ensure a type, maybe like a string. Okay, it's just to ensure that a particular type, maybe a string or whatever, implements specific functions and properties. Now you can think of character sequence, which is some people call it char or char sequence. Okay, you can think of it as a more generic representation of a string like class. So a button's text property, this text property of a button could be a string, or it could be an object that is also a character sequence. So this put extra method, okay, it actually accepts a string, not just any character sequence. That's why we are calling to string. Because the text here, it could be a character sequence, it could also be a string. But specifically, the put extra method accepts a string, not just any character method. So we just have to do our toString to avoid, any hitch along the way. So the last thing when you're done is to call the start activity method. Okay, so we can get that by using our context.start activity, and then you now have to pass in the intent as an argument. So the intent that we created. So that is actually how to do that. So this is how to create an intent. Okay, just that we added an extra. Of course, we could have just stopped here. We could have just stopped here and then called context or start activity. But this, for the sake of the application we're building, so I decided to introduce that as well. So let me run this, and then let's see what happens when we try to tap on a particular letter. Okay, let's see what happens when we try to tap on a particular letter. Okay. So let's wait for that to actually run quickly. Let's hold on. Okay, so it should be done. Yeah. Okay, so let's see. So I'm going to click on B. So you can see it opens another activity, which is the detailed activity. So for now, there's nothing done here, so it's just empty. Okay, it's empty. So you can see that we have been able to open another screen. You can see that I and F and the like. So it just opens the detail screen is actually displayed. But for now, there are no words to show. So we're actually that's what we're going to do now. Okay, we're going to do now. So we basically we'll set up our detail activity so that it shows the words for whichever letter, because when you click on, let's say H rather, okay, the line of code here in 56, it now passes letter as a name and then H as as the actual letter. When you click on B, it passes letter as the name and then B as the value to the next screen. So let's set up our detail activity. Okay, we have done it. We've actually just set up an explicit intent. So let's go to our detailed activity. Now we need to so here in our letter adapter, we are doing a put extra in one activity. Okay, we're doing a put extra. So since we are going to the detailed activity, we need to get that that information, that extra information. We need to get that extra information. So how do we do that? So in our Oncreate method, yeah, we're also going to talk about activity life cycles, but I think probably that will be in the next class. So we'll get to talk about the Oncreate and the like. So inside our Oncreate method, okay, we're now going to replace, because here, yeah, we're going to get that. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a variable called letter ID. So how do we get that extra? So we'll use the intent. You can see from this from this access, which is from the get intent or set intent. But of course, with the way we are using it, it's going to be get intent. So intent dot extras, which is the get extra method, dot get string. Remember, it's a string we're expecting, which is that name. It's a string. The value is actually a string. So get string. And then what does it take? If you look at it, it takes a key. Okay, it takes a key. If you look up there, a key, or it takes the default value. So so what's the key? So the key now is the name that we gave here. This name. So I'm just going to copy this. I would advise you highlight and copy, so probably you don't forget and have a typo. Then I'm just going to paste that, okay? Because it has to be exact. Okay, it has to be exact. And then finally, I have to convert it to string. So this is for null checks. I'm just going to do that, and then I think we should be fine. Okay, so let me just run through it again. So you may be asking where this intent property is coming from. Okay, so of course, just know it's not a property of the detailed activity. Okay, but it's the property of any activity. Okay, this intent is a property of any activity, and it basically keeps a reference to the intent used to launch that activity. Okay, so that's why you can actually get something from it, because it keeps a reference to the intent that was used to launch launch the activity. Now the extras here is of type bundle. Okay, the extras here is from type bundle. You can see it's from the Android.os.bundle. So it retrieves a map of extended data from the intent. You can actually read that here. Okay, remember we talked about map. So key value pairs. So you choose a map of extended data from the intent. Okay, so basically just provides a way to access all extras that has been passed into the intent. That's just what we mean. Now, what else do I need to talk about here? The question mark. Okay, yeah. So now the reason why we have this question mark here is this. Okay, now let me take this out. Now you could see there's an error here. No, so only safe or non-ascended calls are allowed on a nullable receiver of type bundle. Okay, now so what does this do? It returns the value that is associated with the given key. Okay, so that means if there's a value for that key, it will return it, or it will return null if no mapping of the desired type exists for that given key, or a null value is explicitly associated with the key. So there is a possibility of getting null. There's possibility of getting a null value here. So what the reason basically is that intents and extras are nullable. Okay, meaning that they may or may not have a value. It's possible they may have a value. An intent may have an extra, it may not have an extra. So they may or may not have a value. So sometimes you may want a variable to be null. Okay, sometimes you may want a variable to be null. So the intent property here might not actually be an intent. That means that's if the activity wasn't launched from an intent, okay? And maybe the extras, property might not actually be a bundle, but rather a value called null. So basically in Kotlin, null means the absence of a value. That's what null means. It's just the absence of a what value. So imagine having a key with no what value. Okay, so the object may exist, or it may be null. So, and the thing is this, if your application tries to access a property or maybe call a function on a null object, your application will actually what crash. Okay, it will actually what crash. So to safely access the value, we now have to put our question mark there. We now put that what operator after what the name. So what basically this is just if the intent is null, your app will not even attempt to access the extra what property. If the intent is null, it won't try to access it. That's basically what that does. Okay, and if the extras is null, your code won't even attempt to call the get string. So if we had this, so what I'm saying is, if we had this here, if the intent is null, our app will not actually even try to get this extra. If the extra is null, it won't even try to call the get string what method to access it. Okay, so that's the safety there to avoid crashing your application. Okay. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so well, for somebody who may ask, how will you actually know which properties require a question mark to ensure null safety? How will you know? Okay, because if you notice, I didn't have this here. So how would you know? Now, this is it. You can actually tell, if the type name is followed by a question mark, the type name. So let me take this out. Assuming I just finished doing this. So you can see intent here. You can see what intent. Okay. Now, dot extras. You can see this extra here. You see this is the type name and it has this question mark symbol. So this shows you. So there are two things, okay? If the type, okay, if the type is followed by a question mark or it is followed by an exclamation mark, just like you have in this intent. You can see the intent here. This is the type. And then you see there's an exclamation mark. So if it has an exclamation mark followed, following the data, the type, or a question mark, then you know that that property requires this question mark for null safety. It need to ensure null what safety. Okay, so let's take that back. Yeah, so let's ensure null what safety. And one final thing to note is the actual letter is retrieved with get string here. We are using this method to retrieve to retrieve the actual what letter. So it's going to return a string, but let me show you something. I think I'm just going to, let me just delete this out, undo. So you can actually see it returns a string and it has this nullable, which is possible for you to get a null value. That's why you have this nullable, you have this question mark after the word type. So string is called to ensure that it's actually what a string, because of course, yes, get string, you're expecting a string, right? Because we're using it, but it's possible. What if it's empty? Okay, what if it's empty? And what if it's not, what if it is null? So we are calling this, we could have actually just done something like this. We could have actually just done something like this. Okay, we could have done something like this, but we are actually calling the toString because this getString method returns what you can see here, a string value. It returns a string value or it returns what null. So to actually ensure if it's a string, to ensure it's a string and not null, that's why we actually call the toString what method. So let's now run the application. Let's now run the application. So remember, we have the word adapter already set up. So let's run that. So let's see what we have. Let me just go back. So okay, so I think we're missing. Okay, yeah, missing something. Sorry. Okay, so let me move. I think I missed something out of there. Okay, so let's move. Let's move. Okay. So I think so yeah, so I think we need to set up this. So let me just do this quickly. Okay, so let me confirm that I actually set this up too. Okay. Okay, so this should be activity detail binding. Okay. So here we should use our word adapter. Okay, so I think that's just what I needed to. So it's, do we actually have an error? Okay, so no, so yeah, we need to pass in a context. Okay, so from our word adapter takes two things. It takes a context and then the letter. Okay, the particular letter. So I'm now going to, so what's the first thing it takes? So the letter, so I'm going to pass in the letter ID, which we actually got, from the intent, and then of course a context. Well, I could just, let me see. Okay, let me check something. Okay, let me get this quickly. Which best way to do this now? Okay, since I'm using okay. So our context to be this, yeah, which is the activity. So let's see. Let's see how this goes. Okay. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, so we're fine. So when I click on B is being passed and received, and then our word adapter does the rest. So once the detail activity receives B, okay, and passes it into this adapter. So what happens? Our adapter does its magic. Okay, it receives the letter ID, okay, and then uses it to, filters. Once it receives it, now filters the words, the ones that starts with B. It shuffles it, returns 5, and then sorts it. So that's why we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and of course it is sorted. Okay, so it started with balloon, basket, bench. So I want to click on B again. Balloon, bench, basket. So that's the whole shuffle thing. Okay, so that's that. Of course, if you have questions, please do not hesitate to ask. I trust you can actually hear me. So let's move on. So let's do some cleaning up. Okay, let's do some cleaning up before we go ahead. So I want us to, so the code that actually performs this intent, let's see. Let's go back to the detail activity. Now, when we actually retrieve the selected letter, okay, when we retrieved it, okay, from here, you can see we retrieved it with this. We had coded this, the name of the extra, which is letter. The name of the extra here was what? Letter. So when we came here, we had coded letter. Okay. Now, of course, this actually works for a small application like this, but it's actually not the best approach for larger applications, where you have many more intent extras to keep track of. You may just mix it up. So of course, one way to actually do it, solve that, you could actually create a constant called letter. Okay, but you could actually get, of course, as you add more extras to your application, that means you have to create a lot of this. So what we'll now do is this. Remember that the string is used in both detail activity and main activity. Okay, it's used both in the main activity and it's used also in the detail activity. So we actually need to define a constant that can be used across multiple classes. Okay, across multiple classes. So a good thing is that there's a feature in Kotlin that can be used to separate your constants and make them usable without a particular instance of the class. Okay, so across various classes, you can across multiple classes, you can define a constant that you use across. So that's Kotlin feature is what we call companion objects. Okay, we call it companion objects. So basically, a companion object is similar to other objects, okay, which is instance of a class. It's similar to other objects, okay, but only a single instance of a companion object will exist for the duration of your program. Okay, only a single instance of a companion object will exist for the duration of your program. And that's why it's sometimes it's also called, sometimes it's called, there's what we call a singleton pattern. We'll actually talk about singletons. I think it's part of what we should talk about. Now, there are actually numerous, there are a lot of use cases for singletons actually, that is beyond, what we're actually doing now. Okay, so for now, we'll use a companion object as a way to organize our constants and make them accessible outside of this detail activity. So how do we do that? Just above our Uncreate, I'll create a companion object. Okay, so you just say companion object and then you open up your curly brace. So I'm going to create a constant here. So I'm going to say const val. Okay, and then of course constant, you can actually use a capital letter to name it. And then I'm now going to pass in letter there. Okay, so now to use this constant now, okay, I'm just going to update this guy. So instead of putting this, I'll just call, letter. Yeah, because it has the value, this value that we need. But now we are making a companion so that we can reuse it outside. So imagine if you wanted to just create just a constant, okay, that you could use, it's still fine. But if I just define only a constant in this class alone, you can't access it outside. So imagine probably I had like 5 classes that uses this word letter. So it's best that will need that letter. Okay, so it's best to just create a companion object, and then get to reuse that. Okay, so let's move on. Yeah, so this is where we're actually going to call that. Then I'm going to switch to our letter adapter. So here I now need, so instead of using this, I need that constant. And where is the constant? The constant is in the detail activity class. So how do I get it? I'm just going to say detail activity dot letter. You can see that, and then we're fine. Okay, so that's actually what that's one. That's just to kind of clean things up. That's just to clean things up. Okay, so moving on. Now let's go to the next one, implicit intent. Okay, let's talk about implicit intent right now. I think we should be able to round this up so we can go to much more interesting stuff in our next class. So we talked about explicit, implicit. So we said explicit rather, within the application. When you want to open activities within the application, okay, you know your destination. But implicit, you just give the action, and then the Android system, figures out how to handle that action for you. So in using implicit intent, okay, we want to be able to know that when you click on a word, when you click on, let's say, brief, now there's no, the on-click listener is not working. But what we want to do is when we click on brief, we want to get the definition of brief on Google. Okay, so I want to, it's just, like a Google search. I want to just go out of the application to another application to find out the meaning of that particular word. So we're going to use this dictionary functionality that is provided by Google search. Okay, so instead of adding, because I don't want to add a new, yes, we could add a new activity that will now show the meaning of those words. Okay, but for now, let's just launch a browser from our application. So from our application, we want to open another application. That is what's implicit, what's intent. Okay, so let's move on. So what are we going to do now? So let's create an implicit intent. So we want to perform a Google search for the word. So the first search results will be a dictionary definition of the word. Now, of course, the base URL is still the same base URL you use for search. I don't know. I've used. So this is for search. Let me just show you. Of course, if you want to search for a word, so I'm going to create another constant. So I'm going to call this. Let me just use the word search index. Okay, and then this is HTTPS on that. Sorry. Okay, www.google.com/search Q, right? Yeah. So when you actually put in a word, this URL actually is the same. So just the word comes next and then it searches for the word. So these are search words prefix. Now, so we're going to use it in the word adapter now. So it's time to come to the word adapter. Now in our unbind view holder, okay, in our unbind view holder, now I've already gotten a context, okay? We did it there, but I've gotten a context here. Now this to set the text, okay? This to set the text, just like what we did here, to set the actual text on this button. Now, so let's create an on-click listener. So I'm going to say holder dot the button dot set on-click listener. And then I'm going to say, so I'm going to create a variable called query URL. And this is going to be of type URI. I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about this maybe a bit briefly, but I'll talk about it now. But let me just do URI.parse. So I want to parse the string. So what do we want to parse? Now I'm going to call detail activity dot the search index, yes. Okay. Dot the search index, and then we'll attach item. So what is item? Item here is just a string, okay, for the particular word. So we'll attach it to, but basically, when you put it like this, this is the whole query URL equals, and then let's attach this to it. So basically what you will now have, this will just give results in maybe, let's say, brief. This is just what it will result in, okay? And then when you search this, of course, you should see the definition of, you should see everything about brief. So back to the word adapter. So that is actually that. So now, what does URI stand for? So let me just put it as a comment here. So URI Okay, it stands for uniform resource identifier. Now, I know most of you are used to URL, okay? I know most of you are used to URL. We'll talk about URL. Now, but URI stands for Uniform Resource Identifier. Now, URL actually is called uniform, it's an acronym for Uniform Resource Locator. And what is URL? It's actually a string that points to a web page. www.google.com, www.facebook.com, www.facebook.com/sign-in, sign up. That is a string that points to a web page. Now, but a URI, which is the Uniform Resource Identifier, is a general term for the format. That's the format of the URL. Is a general term for the format. So all URLs are URIs. Okay, all URLs are URIs. Because a URI is a more general term for the format of that URL. So all URLs are actually URIs, but not all URIs are URLs. Okay. Now, other URIs, like for example, an address for a phone number, like an address for a phone number could actually begin with this tel : but this is actually there's what we call a URN, which is Uniform Resource Name. This is actually a uniform resource name. Consider this as a URN rather than a URL. You understand? This is not a URL because this doesn't point to a web page. Okay, so this is more of a URN rather than a URL. Okay, so that's why we said all URLs are URIs, but not all URIs are URLs. And this is an example of a this is also a URI. Okay, it's also a URI. Okay, so the data type that is actually used to represent both of them, okay, either the URN or the URL is this URI, small capital letter U, small letter R, and I. That's the data type to represent them. So just to so your URL, just to reiterate, is Uniform Resource Locator. Okay, points to a web page, a string, so you can see Facebook https:// facebook.com. That's a URL. We have a URN, which is Uniform Resource Name. Okay, where you can have your tel, which is TL : then +234 ... That's a Uniform Resource Name. Okay, but both of them are housed under the URI, which is the Uniform Resource Identifier. Okay, so now let's move on. I think we've talked about that enough. So now there's no reference to an activity in an application here. We're just providing a URI, okay, without an indication, any indication at all of how it's actually going to be used. So after defining this, let's initialize an intent now. So this is going to be our implicit intent. Okay, so I'm going to say val intent. Of course, intent is an object. So I'm going to call intent, and then so I'm going to pass in. So you can actually see there are a lot of things here, parameters. So before, what we passed in was the context when we're actually using explicit intent, but we are using implicit intent. So we're going to pass in the action. We're going to pass in an action. So what is the action? So the action here, I'm going to say intent dot, going to call action view. So there are a lot of actions here. You can see action send to, action send, action view, action airplane mode change, action all apps, action answer. There's a lot of actions that you can actually use here action to create a reminder, to create a document, action to dial. You know, when you want to call someone, we click on it to dial the person's, probably enter a text, okay? And then you want, when it's being clicked on, you should take that text and dial it, okay? There's a lot of things, action, factory resets, you know, a lot of things, okay? So, but we want to use the action word view. Okay, we want to use the action word view. So this action view displays the data to the user. And of course, you can read it's the most common action performed on data. It is the generic action you can use on a piece of data to get the most reasonable thing to what occur. For example, when used on a contact entry, it will view the entry. When used on a mail to, okay, to bring up a compose window filled with information supplied by the URI, that's when you want to send a mail. And when you use it with the TAL, which is telephone, okay, yeah, so URI, it will invoke your dialer on your phone. We'll get to play around with most of these things. So we'll pass in the action, and then of course we pass in, so what's next? We're going to now pass in our query what's URL. Okay, we're passing our query URL. URI rather. Our query URL. Yeah, okay. URL is actually the variable name, but it holds the URI. Okay, which is actually the you know, where what we're actually going to use to view. So let me just okay, so just to reiterate, so action view, okay, is a generic intent. Okay, and then basically we're just using, we're taking it takes a URI. Okay, we've talked about the URI. It could be a URL or URN, whichever one. And there are other forms of there are other types of URI. And then, but in our case, the URI that it's taking is a web address, which is from our query. It's actually a web address. So the system then knows to process this intent by opening the URI in the user's web browser. It actually what knows. Now, there are some other intent types. Okay, we have the category app maps. Okay, let me see something. Yeah, I know. So there's category. Sorry, there's a lot actually. So there's a lot. What I just showed you was ones that started with A. So there's what we call there's category, you know, app maps. So for example, this category app maps, it's used to launch the map application. There's category app email, as you can see, to launch the email application. There's category app gallery to what launch the gallery. That's your photos application. There's category set, there's action set alarm. That is, you want to setting an alarm in the background. Then of course we talked about the action down. So these are just a lot of intents you can actually use. So so the last thing we'll now do is to launch the intent. Okay, so what launch the intent, and then of course still I'm going to say context dot start activity, and then I'll pass in the intent. Okay, so that should be that. So let's run this and then let's see what this does. Let's run this and then let's see what this does. Okay, apply the changes. Okay. So I clicked on F. So let's see, file, flights, follow, forum, Fox. So let's click on Fox. So you can see it opens up the what browser. It takes that Fox, okay, attached. So you can see search dot equal Fox. You can see that, which is from this this line of code here. And then you search, you see Fox. So it's just your normal Google search, okay. I can do forum, and it takes forum and then searches for forum. So this is an implicit intent, okay. Okay, so that's actually that. That's actually that. Of course, if you have any question, I'm open to answer it if you have any question. Okay, so in the absence of none, let's forge ahead. Let's forge ahead. Okay, so said, can I see your layouts? And we appreciate if you could push it to GitHub and drop the link. Yeah, definitely. I'll do that. It's actually on GitHub. So I'll do that. So you don't have to worry. So you said you want to see the layout. This is just the layout. There's nothing there. This is just the layout. It's just a recycler view in a frame layout. This is the item view for so I'm reusing one item view design for both of them. So but definitely I'll push the code and drop the link for you guys to have access to it. Okay, so let's move on. I think we're about rounding up. Yeah, just a few things left, and then we are done. Okay, so now let's set up menu and then icons. Okay, let's set up the option menu. Okay, let's set up option menu. So basically I want the menu, I want us to be able to toggle from a linear layout to grid. Okay, sort of displaying it as a linear list. I want to use grids. So okay, so let's do that. So first things first, I'm going to let's do that. First of all, let's import an icon. So I'm going to go to new. Yeah, I think let's use this. So I need something like a grid to. I need something like a grid. Okay, could use this. And then let me just rename it. Excuse me. And then I need another one to represent linear. So we can actually just toggle in between both of them. Let me see, linear. Okay. Okay, let me say list. Okay, so I think we can use, which should we use, this or this? Let's see, which, or this one? Let's use this. So it will be a bit distinct from that one. Oh, let's use this. Let's use that. Sorry. Okay. Okay, so now we actually need a way to tell the system what options are displayed in the app bar and which of the icons to use, because we have introduced 2 icons. Okay, so I'm going to add a new resource file. I'm going to add a new resource file, and the resource file will be of type menu. So I'm just going to go to resource folder, new, and I'm going to click on Android resource file. And now this resource type, I'll change it to menu because you need a menu. And then let's call it a layout menu, or you can call it menu or whatever you want to call it. I'm just going to save that. Okay, so let's just add that. Okay, now we also need a way to tell the okay, yeah, okay. So now let's add an item. Okay, let's add what? An item. Now you could actually just click on this and drag down. That does it for you. But let's come back here. So the title of the item, okay? So okay. Let's just say switch icon. Let's just call it that. And then of course, let's extract string resource. Now we need to give it an ID. So an ID, I'll call it action switch. Okay, and then then the next thing we need to give it an icon. So for the icon, I'm going to start with so the very first view, the very first one should be the linear one. Okay, the very first one should be the linear one. So, and then we have what we call the show as. So I'm going to say always. So you can see that when I said always, you see, so we always see that item. Okay, so let me just run through this. So the structure of the menu file is this is just the structure. Okay, just like a layout that you just want to create, that of course starts with a layout manager to hold your views. The menu XML file starts with the menu tag. Okay, it starts with the menu tag that contains individual options. So our menu here just has only one button. Okay, has only one button with an ID. Okay, of course, just like views, the menu of options should have an ID, so you can actually reference it in your code. Okay, and then a title. Now, this text actually it won't actually be visible in the app. Okay, but actually may be useful for screen readers to identify the menu. So it won't be visible actually now. So the icon, of course, the default, I want it to be the list. Yeah, but what we're going to do is that we'll toggle it on and off to show the grid icon, which is the other icon that we actually want brought into the drawable. And then the show as action. So this tells the system how to show the button. Now, because we've set it to always, okay, the button will always be visible in the app bar, and to not become part of an overflow menu. Okay, it won't be always be visible. Okay, so well, of course, just by putting this up doesn't actually mean the menu will do anything. We still need to do some coding. So let's implement it now. Okay, let's implement it. So I'm going to come to my main activity. Now I'm going to do something. Now, first of all, we need to create a variable or a property that will keep track of which layout state the application is in. So you should always know if it is in the linear state or is in the grid state. Okay, you should always know. So we need to keep track of that. So I'm going to create a variable. Well, let me just do it. I could do it inside or outside, but let me do it outside this method. So I'm going to say is linear layout manager. So is the state linear layout manager. So by default, I want to give it a true value. I want it to be true by default. So when the user actually toggles the button, we now want the so since it's default, when the user toggles the button, we want the list of the items to turn into a grid of items. Okay. So of course, remember in when we talked about recycler view, we actually said that we had not just linear layout manager, we have grid layout manager. We also have the staggered grid. Yeah, we have the staggered grid. Okay, so now grid layout manager actually allows for multiple items on a single row. So now let's write a function to choose the layout. Okay, so I'm going to create a function to choose the layout. So let's do that. Private fun choose layout. Remember, we talked about how to create a function. So how do we choose the layout? So first of all, we'll check what the state is. So if is linear layout manager, now, of course, we have set this to be true by default. Okay, we've set this property to be true by default. So if it is true, okay, we want our recycler view dot layout manager to be equal to linear layout manager, and then we'll pass in the context if it is true. But if it is false, we want our layout manager to now be a grid layout manager. Now for the grid layout manager, it takes in a context and then what we call a span count. So basically how many elements or items should be what's displayed. So I'm going to say, so first of all, the context, and then 4. So it display 4 items. Now you can go as far as orientation and reversible. We're not going to do that just for this. Okay, and then after that, I'm now going to call my adapter. Very important. Okay. Now, so basically what we're doing here, okay, we're just using an if statement to assign the layout manager. Okay, so in addition to setting the layout manager, we also need to assign the adapter. Okay, so the letter adapter is going to be used for both the list and the grid layout. Okay, now, but when you initially set up the menu, when we did it in the XML, we gave it a static icon. Okay, we gave it a static icon, which was the linear, this IC view list, which is the one we want to use to represent the linear view. Okay, but of course, after toggling the layout, the icon should change. It should update to show the new the grid layout icon that shows the new function has actually executed. Okay, and of course, you should even be able to switch back. The icon should, when you go to list, it should update to the list icon and the likes. So how do we do that? Let's just create a function for that. On separation of concern. So private fun, and we're going to call this set icon. So this function is going to help us set the icon. And of course, to set the icon, we need the menu item. So I'm going to pass that as a parameter. So menu item, and of course, the menu item is going to be of type menu item. Now, this, we have to make this nullable, because it is possible to get a null. Okay, it is possible to get a null, very possible. So so I'm now going to say this: if menu item, this to be on the safe side, if menu item equals null, what should happen? Return. Okay, return. So just exit the method, don't do anything. If for any reason the menu item is null, just return, don't do anything. Okay, so let's do that. But of course, if it's not, we'll now set the icon. So I'm going to say menu item dot icon. You can see this method here to set the icon will be equal to, now of course we need to know which is which. We need to know which is which. So to do that, of course, to set the icon, I need to check for the linear layout manager. I need to check, is linear layout manager, is the linear layout manager true? That means, is it showing a linear list of items? If it is true, so I'm going to, you see where I'm going to write the code now. I'm going to show you how to do some things and avoid setting. I'm not going to put a curly brace here. So if it is true, I want to get that icon. So I'm going to get it using our context compact dot get drawable. Okay. And this takes a context, which is this, and then r.drawable dot this list. Okay. And then else. Okay, else. So of course, if it's not true, that means it's false, meaning that it is the grid. So else we're going to use the grid thing. Yeah. So you notice this, I didn't actually put the curly brace after this. That yeah. You can actually even take this here, but just to make it readable. Okay. So the icon here that is conditionally set based on the linear layout is linear layout manager property. Okay. So for our application to actually use the menu, we need to override two more methods. Okay, we have done everything, but to actually use it now, we need to override two more methods. The very first one, okay, is what we'll call the Oncreate options menu. So you can see that Oncreate options was menu that takes just one parameter, which is the menu. Okay. So I'm going to just take out this return statement first, and then, so how do we do that? So we're just going to do some setup here. I'm just going to write some code. I know it may seem confusing, but don't worry. Menu inflator dot inflate. So just like you have your layouts, maybe activity main or XML, you have to now set contents view and everything to inflate it. So we're basically doing that. So so this takes so okay, r dot menu dot layout menu, which is the layout file that we created, and then of course we have to pass in a menu type. So we'll just pass in this word menu, which is from here, this particular young man. So I'm going to now create a variable called layout button. Okay, so this code, this is going to be called, it calls the code to set, we want to set the icon based on the linear layout manager of the recycler view. So we want to do it here when we are creating the options menu. Let's set the icons. I'm going to say menu, okay, dot find item. Now our find item, okay, so you can see our menu has a question, the type has a question mark, so we'll have to put this here because it's possible to get a null. So find item. So what item do we want to find? We want to find the our action word switch. This is our action word switch. We want to find this item. Okay, this particular menu item, we want to find it. So after finding it, then I'm now going to call the set icon method and then pass in the layout button. So this will now set the icon as this. Now I could actually just do the whole of this, and put it inside here instead of creating a variable though. And then of course we have to return what? So return true. Okay, if all this is this, they'll return what? True, because you can see this method has a return type of Boolean. Okay, so after inflating our layout, this is where we inflate. This is where we inflate the layout. After inflating the layout, we just call the set icon in your method. Okay. Okay, so that's that. Then the very last one is what we'll call the on options item selected. So the first one on create options menu. This is where you inflate the option menu and perform some additional setup. But for the next one is the on options item selected. So this is that takes in an item. Okay, takes an item. So this is going to handle, this is where we'll call our choose layout method. So it handles the on click when you click on a particular item. Okay, so you now write code here to do something. So I'm going to use a when statement here. So I'm going to say return when, I'm going to say item. Okay, I'm using this because it's of type menu item. So with this object, I can now get access to my what this is. So item dot item ID. We want to get the ID. So this actually holds all, see, it returns the identifier for this, can actually be changed. So basically, this just holds every item identifier, which is their IDs. So when a particular ID is being clicked, no, so what ID? The first ID here, the only ID actually we have is this action what switch. That's the only ID we have. So when this particular ID is clicked, what do we want to do? So when it is clicked, is linear layout manager. And I'm going to do something a bit you may be seeing for the first time. Okay, so let me correct this. So is linear layout manager is, I'm going to update, I want to update the value of its linear layout manager, and I'm going to say, I'm going to do this. So what is this operator? This is it's called a not operator. So not. So is linear layout manager by default is true. You thought this is a Boolean. Here we are saying we're returning the opposite, not true. Okay, that's this operator, not true. So that means the value here is what? False. Of course, if it is not true, it's false. So what we are doing here is that we are setting, if when you click on the switch, that icon, we want to change the linear layout manager to the opposite value. So if it was true, the opposite now becomes false. Okay, so when we do that, after doing that, they will now call our choose layout. So what our choose layout, what does it do? You understand? It actually checks if our linear layout, its linear layout manager checks the value and gives the corresponding layouts, layouts that we want, whether a linear or a grid. And then, of course, also we'll call the set icon. So we'll now update the icon, and then of course passing item, because because it's a menu item. And then we'll just return true here. Okay, now now you can see this, and of course it because say when expression must be exhaustive, so it needs an else what branch. Okay, it needs an else branch. So let's give it an what? Else branch. So I'm just going to say else, then I'm going to use the default this thing. The default is, so which is super dot on option. So this is the default on option item selected. So yeah, that's the default. So when clauses, okay, it requires that all possible paths must be accounted for explicitly. That's why you can see that we are actually calling the particular ID. So we are being explicit. Okay. Okay, so that's that. So these are on options items selected, like I actually said, it actually is called anytime a menu item is tapped. So you need to be very sure to check that, to check which menu item is actually what's tapped. So you need to be very sure of your ID. Okay, so we're just basically using a when statement. Okay, so if the ID matches the action switch, okay, menu item, then we're negating the value of this property is linear layout. Then we'll call choose layout and set icon to update our what UI. So one last thing before we run the application. Okay, since our linear layout manager and our layout manager rather than adapter are now in choose layout. Okay, if you notice these two, and then the adapter also, since it's now in choose layouts, okay, we don't need this guy anymore. Sorry, we don't need these two anymore. Okay, so I'll just call choose layout here. That's all. I'll just call choose layout. So let's run this now and see if there's a magic that's being done. Okay, so let's see, moment of truth. Okay, I think that should be done any time from now. Yes, so let's reinstall and then restart. Okay, so that's actually that. So you can see we have the icon here. Yeah, you can see we have the icon here. So when I click on this is the linear. So when I click on this, you see gets toggled. So this shows me that I am in the grid view. So this is the grid view. And then remember we chose a span count of 4. So 4 items per row. Okay, 4 items per row. So when you click on this, we're moving back to what the linear. So the icon actually tells you, what layout manager is being used. So toggle this back again, and then that is that. So that's actually that. Any question? Any question? Any question? Any question? I think that's, yeah, I think we have successfully, completed that. So summarily, okay, we've talked about explicit intents that we said they are used to navigate to specific activities in your application. Okay, we talked about implicit intents, okay. Basically, you defining the action and then let the system, know how to run that, okay. Like, so implicit intents rather, like opening a link, or probably want to share something, share an image, a document, or what, a song, whatever. And the system will just determine how to fulfill that. But also looked into menu options, okay, that allows you to add buttons and menus to your app bar. Okay, so this is your app bar. And then we also talked about companion objects and how they actually provide a way to reuse constants with a type, rather than, as you can associate reusable constants with a type rather than, an instance of that type, creating instance. So you create reusable constants. And then, of course, how did we actually implemented an intent by getting a reference to context, creating an intent object. We also passed in data, which is the put extra. Okay, and then of course calling start activity. So that's actually it for today's class. That's actually it for today's class. And then of course, in the absence of no question, I think we would actually round this up here. So in the next class, we're going to be looking at the activity life cycle. Okay, we'll talk about what activities are, and then talk about the activity life cycle. And this is a very important class, so try not to miss it. Okay, try not to actually miss it. Try not to miss it. Okay, so I think that will be also. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much, and do have a wonderful